I was standing in the doorway when my mother's voice cut through the air like a blade. "You're ungrateful. Get out and never come back." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just picked up the bag I'd already packed, because somewhere deep down, I think I knew this was coming, and I walked past her without saying a word. My father stood in the hallway with his arms crossed, silent. My older brother Tyler didn't even look up from his phone. And just like that, I left the house I'd grown up in, the house I'd been paying for, and stepped into a life I wasn't sure I was ready for. For 6 months, I convinced myself that moment was freedom, that walking away meant I'd finally chosen myself. I moved into a small apartment across town, went to work every day, cooked simple meals, and tried to build something that felt like peace. But peace is a strange thing when it's built on silence. Because the truth is, I wasn't at peace. I was just waiting. Waiting for an apology that never came. Waiting for someone to ask if I was okay. Waiting for proof that I mattered to them as more than just a solution to their problems. Then one Thursday evening, my phone buzzed. Just once. I glanced at the screen and froze. It was a text from my father. "Why haven't you paid the mortgage?" No greeting, no acknowledgement of the 6 months we hadn't spoken. Just a question that made my stomach drop and my hands shake. I stared at those words until they blurred, and then I laughed. A short, bitter sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. They kicked me out, told me never to come back, and now they wanted to know why I wasn't still funding their lives. I need to give you context, because none of this makes sense without understanding how we got here. My name is Violet, and if you'd met my family a year ago, you would have thought we were normal, maybe even close. My mother, Elaine, was the emotional center of our home. Loud when she was happy, louder when she wasn't. My father, Robert, was the calm one, the one who believed every problem had a logical solution as long as someone stepped up. And my brother, Tyler, 3 years older than me, was the one they still called the dreamer, even though he hadn't dreamed about anything beyond his next video game in over a decade. I was the responsible one. I learned that early. I worked 2 jobs in college to pay my tuition. I graduated with honors and landed a job in finance before most of my classmates had even updated their resumes. I paid my own rent, my own bills, my own everything. And somewhere along the way, my family started to assume that responsibility was just who I was. That helping them wasn't a choice, it was my nature. It started small. Mom would forget to pick up groceries and ask if I could grab a few things on my way over. Then it was the electric bill they were short on. Then the water bill. Then the mortgage. At first, it felt good to help. I told myself that's what families do. They support each other. But helping turned into expected, and expected turned into invisible. I became the person who showed up every Sunday with groceries and a calm smile, stepping into a house that always felt like it was holding its breath before the next argument. Tyler would be on the couch, controller in hand, telling me about his plans for the future. Mom would sigh dramatically about how stressful life had been. Dad would mention, casually, that the mortgage was tight again this month. And every time, their eyes would drift toward me, not with gratitude, with expectation. And every time, I pulled out my wallet and told myself it would get better. But it didn't get better. It got worse. Because the more I gave, the more they needed. And the more I needed, space, recognition, rest, the less they seemed to notice. Until that Sunday 6 months ago, when I walked into the living room and knew immediately that something had shifted. Mom's arms were crossed. Dad stood in the doorway like a judge waiting to deliver a verdict. Tyler didn't even pause his game. They were waiting for me, and I didn't know it yet, but the version of me they depended on was about to stop existing. The weeks after I left felt strange. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of quiet where you notice every sound because there's nothing else to focus on. I worked, I cooked, I reorganized my closet 3 times. Anything to keep my mind from replaying that moment when my mother looked at me with pure contempt and told me to leave. I told myself I'd done the right thing, that walking away was overdue. And for a while, I believed it. Then came that text from my father. "Why haven't you paid the mortgage?" I sat on my couch staring at those words, and my first reaction wasn't anger. It was disbelief. A laugh escaped me, sharp and involuntary, because the absurdity of it was almost too much. They kicked me out. They told me never to come back. And now they wanted to know why I wasn't still playing the role of their personal ATM. I opened my banking app, scrolled through months of transfers labeled mortgage help, bills, groceries, thousands of dollars. Years of my life poured into that house. And they weren't asking because they missed me. They were asking because their supply had run out. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Dad. I didn't open it. Instead, I grabbed my jacket and went for a walk. The cold evening air bit at my skin, and with every step, my anger started to crystallize into something sharper, something clearer. They thought I would stay silent forever. They thought I would keep paying without protest. But as I walked under the streetlights, I realized something I'd never let myself admit before. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was done. By the time I got back to my apartment, my hands had stopped shaking. I sat on the edge of my couch, opened my father's second message, something about needing to talk. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity. I typed slowly, deliberately. I thought I wasn't welcome. That was it. No explanation, no apology, just the truth, stripped bare. I hit send. For a few seconds, nothing happened. No response, no immediate call, just silence. And it was almost poetic. 6 months ago, I left their house without a word. Tonight, I finally said the one thing that should have been said years ago. I set the phone face down and walked to the kitchen, letting my fingertips rest on the cool countertop. The apartment around me felt different, like the air had rearranged itself. Memories started flooding back, not soft or nostalgic, but sharp. Mom telling me as a teenager that girls should know how to support their family. Dad calling me the reliable one, which I later realized was code for the one we can drain. Tyler sighing whenever I asked him to help with anything, then being comforted by Mom for his stress. Me at 22, working 2 jobs, being told I should be grateful for the roof over my head, the roof I was paying for. The pattern had always been there. I just hadn't wanted to see it. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. Then again, still ignored it. A third time. I walked back to the couch and flipped it over. 3 messages from Dad. 1 from Mom. 2 from Tyler. I didn't open any of them. Not yet. Instead, I pulled up my payment history again and scrolled through every transfer. Each one was a snapshot of how hard I'd tried to hold that family together. And each one was proof that love, to them, had always meant money. My phone buzzed again. This time, A call. Mom. I let it ring. Her voice, that shrill panic I knew was coming, no longer had the power to control my breathing. I sat down, folded my hands, and whispered to myself, not anymore. And then the universe must have heard me, because my phone lit up like a fire alarm. Calls, texts, voicemails, all layered on top of each other until the screen looked like it was struggling to breathe. This was the moment. This was when everything they'd built on top of me started to crack. Dad's name flashed first, then Mom's, then Tyler's, all in rapid succession. I let them ring. I wanted to hear their desperation without actually hearing it. The muffled vibration told me everything I needed to know. They weren't worried about me. They weren't even worried about losing me. They were worried about losing the mortgage payment. Eventually, I answered, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to hear them say it out loud. I slid my thumb across the screen. Dad's voice exploded immediately. Violet, finally. Why didn't you answer? Do you understand how serious this is? No, I said calmly. But I'm sure you're about to tell me. He took a breath, trying to reel himself back into that falsely rational tone he always used when he thought he could still control the situation. We're behind on the mortgage. The bank called. We're in danger of missing another payment. You should have paid it this month. I let the words hang for a moment. I should have, I repeated quietly. Yes, you know your mother and I can't cover it. Tyler's still. Still what? I cut in. Still looking for his purpose? Still figuring things out? Still sitting on the couch playing games? Silence. Even through the phone, I could feel the way the air changed in that house. Don't disrespect your brother, Dad snapped. Funny, I said, leaning back on my couch. That's exactly what Mom said 6 months ago, right before she told me to get out and never come back. Another silence. But this one wasn't empty. It was charged. Mom cut in now, her voice sharp with performed outrage. We were upset. Families say things they don't mean. But you meant it enough, I said. To watch me walk out with one bag and never check if I made it home alive. You're being dramatic, she spat. And you're being manipulative, I said simply. Mom inhaled sharply, offended by the honesty. Dad stepped back in. Violet, listen. This isn't the time for old arguments. The house is not my responsibility, I finished for him. But you've always helped, he insisted. You know we depend on you. I know, I said softly. I finally know. Before he could respond, another call buzzed in. I glanced at the screen. Tyler. I almost laughed. The irony was unreal. I need to take this, I told Dad, and hung up before he could protest. I answered Tyler's call. He didn't even say hello. What the hell, Violet? Mom's crying. Dad's freaking out. Why did you say that to them? Which part? I asked. The part where I said I wasn't welcome, or the part where I stopped paying your bills? He cursed under his breath. You know they can't afford the mortgage without you. And why is that my problem? I asked. Because you're the responsible one. The sentence crashed against me like cold water. There it was. The script they'd handed me my entire life. The role I never auditioned for, but somehow played flawlessly. And you're what, Tyler? I asked, keeping my voice calm. The delicate one? The fragile genius? The man-child who needs protecting? He went silent, but I didn't stop. I left that house 6 months ago, And none of you, not one, thought to apologize. But the minute your finances fall apart, suddenly I'm worth calling again. That's not fair, he muttered. 8 months, I said. The mortgage hasn't been fully paid in 8 months. How do you even know that? He demanded. Because, I said, letting each word land, I called the bank. He exhaled hard, the sound of someone caught without a lie prepared. So I'll ask you plainly, I continued. What did you all do with the money I sent? Why does that matter? He snapped. The point, I said sharply, is that you lied, all of you, for nearly a year. And the second I stopped paying, the whole house fell apart. He had no comeback. I hung up. I wasn't finished. I dialed the bank again, more for confirmation than answers. The representative spoke in a steady, neutral tone, explaining that partial payments had been submitted here and there, but not enough to satisfy the monthly requirements. 8 months of inconsistency. 8 months of deception. When I ended the call, another stream of messages from Mom flooded in. How could you do this to us? We raised you. You owe your family. You're tearing us apart. I breathed slowly, letting her words pass through me without sticking. Then I called them back, putting the phone on speaker. Mom answered mid-sob. Violet, please. No, I said, voice low and steady. Now you're going to listen. They fell silent. For years, I paid the bills, the groceries, the mortgage. I covered everything while Tyler did nothing. And you both acted like it was normal, expected. Dad tried to interject. We were struggling. You were doing well. I was drowning, I snapped. You just didn't look closely enough to see it. Mom sniffed loudly. You're being cruel! No, I said. Cruel is throwing your daughter out and then expecting her to keep paying for the roof over your heads. Neither of them spoke. You said I wasn't welcome, I continued. I took you at your word. And now you want my money. But not me. I'm done. Mom's voice came back in a frantic whisper. If you don't help us, we could lose the house. That's between you and the bank, I said. Not me. Dad's voice rose, the last attempt at control. You're abandoning your family. No, I said quietly. You abandoned me when you chose convenience over your own child. There was a long, trembling pause, and then the final blow, clean, precise, irreversible. I won't pay another $1. Handle your own mess. Before they could respond, I ended the call. The phone buzzed again, instantly, then again and again. But I placed it face down on the table and walked away. For the first time in my life, their chaos stayed on the other side of the line. The silence that followed was nothing like the silence I'd lived with for years, the heavy, suffocating kind, where everyone expected me to fix the unspoken crisis. This silence felt clean, like fresh air after a long storm. For the next few days, my phone kept buzzing off and on, but never with the same frantic intensity as that first night. The calls shifted from outrage to pleading to guilt-laced monologues I didn't bother opening. I didn't need to. I already knew every script they would use, every emotional hook, every threat wrapped in disappointment. And none of them worked anymore. I went to work, made myself coffee, took long walks through the city blocks near my apartment. Simple things, quiet things, things that belonged only to me. And it struck me how rare this feeling was, this sense that my life was finally mine. Meanwhile, The consequences they had tried to dump onto my shoulders finally landed where they belonged. The bank continued reaching out to my parents directly. Tyler stopped calling altogether, maybe out of shame, maybe out of anger, maybe both. Dad sent a few stiff messages about figuring things out. Mom sent paragraphs that swung wildly between apologies and accusations. But I didn't reply, not out of cruelty, out of necessity. Because if I stepped back into that role, if I paid even one bill, I knew exactly what would happen. The cycle would reset, the burden would shift back onto me, and nothing would change. So I didn't step back. I stayed in my quiet apartment, breathing easier than I had in years, realizing something I should have known a long time ago. Letting people face the consequences of their choices isn't betrayal. Sometimes it's the only way anyone ever grows. A few weeks later, I sat by my apartment window, watching the city lights flicker against the glass. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel tense. Didn't feel responsible for anyone else's emergencies. Didn't feel like a disappointment waiting to happen. I felt free. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was finally honest. My parents could no longer pretend I was their built-in solution. Tyler could no longer pretend I was the reason his life stayed stuck. And I could no longer pretend that love meant sacrificing myself until there was nothing left. Walking away wasn't abandonment. It was self-respect. And if you've ever been the one holding a family together while quietly falling apart, you know exactly how heavy that role can be, and how liberating it feels the moment you finally put it down. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.